Hey, all, DT Neal again, talking about writing, books, everything in between. One thing I'm a firm believer of are pen names. Pen names are great. Long ago, I remember learning about something called negative crossover, which was something Dean Koontz encountered it, or at least was warned against it. And what negative crossover is if you're writing a particular type of story, let's say you're writing science fiction or fantasy, and you jump into another genre, negative crossover is such where you end up alienating your existing audience and not picking up any new audience because they're like, hey, Bob Smith always wrote the science fiction stories, and now he wrote this noir thriller. What the heck's going on here? That doesn't make any sense. So what I've done over the years is I've written across different pen names. So I have about a half dozen different pen names that I use. And I like it because it allows me to focus on a specific story squarely from that perspective. I'm not trying to stretch my DT Neal name across multiple genres. Now, I have done a few things across genres like that in years past, but nowadays I definitely stick to specific lanes for stories. So, for me, if I'm doing my existing hyphenated horror, as I call it, those tend to be DT Neal stories, overwhelmingly. Science fiction, overwhelmingly, Dean Vale is what I use for that. For fantasy, I use Dane Vale. I have a couple other ones that I use and are going to be using in future years, which will encompass other specific lanes. And I like that about that. I think it allows a certain degree of focus. So I would recommend, if you're not already doing it, to consider doing that for specific genre offerings. It's not like assuming a character per se, because you're writing, your own voice is going to show through no matter what you're doing. But although you can, if you really want to really jump out of particular styles, you can. I know writers who have done that, and they really kind of adopt almost a persona in the concept of that. For me, it's more a practical solution to the issue of I want to write this kind of story, and then I think, okay, is this a science fiction story? Okay, well then that's going to be a Dean Vale story. Oh, is this a fantasy? Okay, that's going to be Dane, etc. So, pen names, it can feel kind of flaky for perhaps non-writers who aren't used to that. People who haven't written anything, they don't think in those terms. But if you're producing enough content and you find yourself with this body of work across multiple different genres, it's something to consider. You could perhaps risk negative crossover and just stretch your name across multiple genres. But in these days, I always feel like it's so hard to get people to commit to reading anything anyway. There may be more opportunity for something if they kind of can look and go, oh, that's a Dean Vale story. Okay, this is going to be in science fiction. It builds up a little bit of certainty of expectation. They may not know exactly what the story is that they're going to get, but they know if they pick up that particular name that they're going to get a particular kind of story that they're looking for. And so I suppose my earlier talking about tropes, it's that's part of it. There is a desire for certainty of expectation. They may not know where the story is exactly going to go. That's why they might read it. But they also want a particular kind of story. A mystery writer sure as hell better serve up a mystery. You can't be a mystery writer and not write mystery stories. For people like that in those genre lanes, they're absolutely obligated to deliver on those. And part of that branding exercise, I guess you could think of it that way, is through the author name that lets them kind of prepare. It's kind of like cinematically when people say, oh, that's an Alfred Hitchcock movie. I know what that's going to do. It's going to do this, 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 and this. That's because it's Alfred Hitchcock. Stanley Kubrick. And again, using movie examples, but a Hemingway is the same way. Joyce Carol Oates, Flannery O'Connor, any number of people like that. You kind of know Shirley Jackson. You know where you're going to get on some of those things. And so if you're producing enough material as a writer where you really can look at the body of work across different genres, I think it would suit you well to consider pen names, because it makes it easier for you, makes it easier for the reader. They know what kind of they're going to get into. So it's something to consider.